In his 20s, Alexander was looking at trillionaire status. But for the next level, 331 BC, Alexander journeys into the desert, not to conquer an army. He's there to let his old self die off. The King of Macedon be gone because he wants to emerge as legendary, with glory, glorified as a god. Egypt will do it for him. But finish this lesson to find out, was Alexander high and lifted up, or was he lacking the most important trait of being a god? I'm Mr. Hull, and this is Ancient History. Welcome to Classical Kingdoms, where timeless stories reveal truth and wisdom for your journey. This is Lesson 41 in your Ancient History course. It is the Metamorphosis of Alexander. What is metamorphosis? That's the change. Alexander's had a difficult struggle. We've watched him grow up. We've watched him go to school with Aristotle. We've seen the inheritance his father gave him, and then he was winning. All of this was covered in our recent 4 lessons. Now the change. What change is it? To a god? The war is pretty much over. But the real danger for Alexander is going to begin, because this battlefield, it's now in the mind and the religious ideas of the people. We will look at Alexander's trillionaire map, but we'll see what happens in his years of contributing to the map, adding to the glory of the people that he has conquered, but also his own personal tragedy, because he dies a young man. This matters a lot for you, for the ambition that we're trying to have in balance. We all want ambition in life, but this is a classical journey for us all. And Alexander shows us a lot and has given us a lot. So by the end of this episode, you will be leveled up as a classical scholar to see the legacy of Alexander the Great. So this desert scene, this nightmare scenario in 331 BC, as a Macedonian soldier, you might be going along with Alexander, hundreds of miles west from the Nile River into the Libyan desert, where there's no water, no landmarks, and Alexander is leading you. He's dragged you here because he needs to speak to a priest. This is going to be the moment for Macedonian king to fail, to drop off, because King of Macedon, that word is Basilius. Basilius, that just means he's the first among equals. And if you think that's a good Greek title, Macedonian, it's more of the people, but this is different. This is new. Scholars, I'm asking you to change with Alexander, because we are trying to do it all. We're going to have everything. We want Alexander to listen to his generals and to think democratically, but to level up to God's status. Alexander had just conquered Egypt without a fight, and Egyptians don't want to be led by a common equal. I mean, they've never had anything like democracy. What do they have? Do you remember your Egypt history? Lesson 9, Lesson 12 with Classical Kingdoms. You know Pharaoh. Pharaoh is ruler, priest, and god. The Egyptians want that. Alexander realizes to rule this new world that includes Egypt and so many lands that he cannot be mortal. Can't be mortal. He needs some sort of a big system upgrade. You know, his software upgrade, his Aristotle school, his education, his training, what his father gave him, the machinery, everything is working so well. But he needs God's status. We're out in the desert. You know, Plutarch tells that his army nearly died of thirst. They claim that 2 ravens Or perhaps the story that two hissing snakes appeared and guided them before they died of thirst and guided them into the green palm trees of the Siwa Oasis. Rising out of the haze, and the temple of Zeus Ammon was there. Alexander walked toward the temple alone, but he needed to be in the presence of these people. You can't do this alone. People have to see you become a god. So the high priest comes out to greet Alexander. Pay close attention, because history is going to turn just on these words. Now, the priest said something along the lines of, "Oh, my son," but it was heard by the troops and recorded, and the story is, "Oh, son of Zeus," not my son, Zeus's son. So now you have a priest way off in a desert, remote locations. Is Alexander the son of Zeus? That's what his mom said. Remember, his mom, the night before her wedding with Philip II, got struck by lightning. That was Zeus. Made her pregnant. That was Alexander. Now, Alexander is going to accept any divine revelation, any ways to level up into God status, and it's working. This is the trillionaire, the world conqueror, the benefactor of the people. He's going to do well with his conquered territories. We'll see. Before Alexander leaves this sacred site, it's an oracle, the temple of Zeus in this oasis. Before he leaves, he wants information. He, as an oracle site, he could ask the priests for special information. Only the gods would know. So he's like, "Hey, have my father's murderers been punished?" Your father's murderers. Could you rephrase the question? We don't want to be nailed down exactly. That's kind of the way oracles work. So he asks it again. The priests respond. The oracle's message is that your true father is immortal and cannot be harmed. Now, people hear this. This is the message. This is what's being written. And with Plutarch and other historians recording this, Alexander can walk out of this temple site, walk away from this oasis, the oracle, and be a changed man, high and lifted up, glorified. Is he son of God? Because his dad was a god. In fact, they're confirming his dad's immortal. He's no longer going to need to call himself the King of Macedon, the Basilius, the man of the people, or now he is the cosmocrator. The cosmos, the ruler of the cosmos, is now him. His oldest general, Parmenion, watches this transformation actually with dread. Parmenion remembers his father, Philip II. This is not immortal, not a god. He remembers the mud and the blood of those old wars just to rule the kingdom. He sees kind of a dangerous new virus taking hold of Alexander's mind, but the Greeks and Alexander's mom called it Pothos. Pothos is the longing for what's impossible and beyond what's a normal realm. The old guard of generals. They've been with him some of them with him since school, since the teenage years. These generals realize that their king has died in the desert, but a new divine. Do you think he's a god in 331 BC? Is this what you do to become a god? We've seen this. We're going to see it again in history. This is how people get their power. And Alexander is the great, and he's the god, and he's the pharaoh. And is he high and lifted up and glorified? Well, let's head on, because he is trillionaire status. And if he's a god, you can't just live in normal cities. So what do? You build new cities. Alexander leaves the desert, still a struggle, heading off to the coast of Egypt and finding a perfect strip of land just right between the Mediterranean Sea and one of the lakes that the Nile is draining into. Alexander decides to build the mother of all perfect cities. He's got to think of a name of it. It's really quite funny. It's not hard to think of a name when Alexandria is going to be one we're going to use over and over and over again. But he had a problem. The engineers forgot the chalk to mark out the city streets and so on. This is, by the way, going to be a real organized grid. These city planning invented by the Greeks, but they don't have any chalk and rope and everything. So Alexander orders them to use barley flour from the soldiers' rations so that he could draw a massive grid on the earth where suddenly seabirds swooped down from the river, from the waters, and they ate the flour. Now, the soothsayers panicked at this. What is a soothsayer? I think that's kind of the Roman version of fortune tellers. Like the priests that would work at the oracle sites, they can speak with the divine. These soothsayers are in panic. They think it's an omen of destruction. What is an omen? It's that bad message of destruction. But Alexander rebrands the moment because you can interpret these things. You just have to have these messages. This means my city will feed the world. Yeah, positive messages. This works great. He hires an architect named Dinocrates of Rhodes, the island of Rhodes. Many famous things. This is bringing the best and brightest together. And this city will be special. We'll talk more later. Alexandria is being designed by the same Dinocrates who had once proposed carving Mount Athos into a giant statue of Alexander, holding a city in his hand. You see what's happening here, don't you? Together, they designed this city with streets, some of them 100 feet wide. Why do you need such a wide streets? For your procession, your divine, your godlike status, your strength. They built a massive causeway, the Heptastadion. The Heptastadion is 7 stadia long. Over a kilometer, not quite a mile, it connects the island of Pharos to the mainland. This is more than a fortress now. It's kind of the engine to make the city, the fusion engine to make this city with Greek logic and running on Egyptian hardware. Just this blend of a city to make it spectacular for centuries. Spoiler alert, it will. But the building, the city building, the planning, that's not really enough. He needs to design, a new type of human to live here. Skip ahead to 324 BC. At the site of Susa, this was one of the capitals for the Persians. Alexander looks at his empire and sees this fatal flaw that the Greeks don't like the Persians hate the Greeks, so he attempts a radical kind of experiment by ordering a mass wedding. We had mentioned these just in lesson 40, that having his soldiers, having his generals marrying local women, that preserves peace, that the cultures are united. And Alexander himself marries the daughter of Darius and the daughter of Artaxerxes, both ladies now his wives, and 80 of his top officers taking Persian noble women as wives. He thinks this will be the way to get everyone, celebrating at the weddings, bringing everybody together. 10,000 couples, all drinking from gold cups. Everybody's getting married. It looks like a total celebration. But to Macedonians, They feel like they have lost their king. Well, yeah, there's a metamorphosis going on. It is an erasure of Macedonian something. But wait, there's more. Alexander has this program the boys called the Epigoni. These Epigoni, we have 30,000 Persian boys that have been getting trained Greek. They speak Greek. They're dressed like Macedonians. They use Macedonian fighting techniques and spears. Alexander is looking at his tired, scarred Macedonian veterans, and he knows, like, within a few years, these Persian boys, what will they be? Old enough to fight, loyal to this god king, Alexander. He's telling his oldest friends, we can replace you with younger Persian fighters, but he's trying to unify everyone. His men are struggling with this. The man that led them like Achilles, and they saw him become like a god, like a pharaoh. Some of them are struggling that this metamorphosis is really some type of betrayal and a loss of their Macedonian past. What do you say? Do you like the change that Alexander is undergoing to make a strong and unified nation? Click the like button. If you don't like it and you prefer Macedonian, click the like button. Don't forget to subscribe and check out classicalkingdoms.com for the full course, all mapped out for you with learning platform advantages if you join. Moving on, because Alexander, he's got more updates, more upgrades for everyone. The tension does grow. We saw this for one example in 328 BC. There was a fortress called Maracoanda, and with a night of heavy drinking, some of these soldiers, wine was flowing, and the flattery. What is flattery? Kind of those compliments to gain favor, fake compliments gain favor. And so all the men are calling Alexander a god to his face. Okay, so that's flattery. He likes it. But one man refuses to play along. Cleitus the Black. Cleitus the Black. He saved his life. Remember in the last lesson about the battles, Cleitus the Black is a rough old school general. At the Battle of Granicus, he came in and cut off that Persian's arm just in the nick of time. But Cleitus praises Philip II. What does that mean? Philip II's been killed. Philip II, it is suspicious about Philip II's death. Did Alexander have a role in it? Did Alexander's mom have a role? By praising Philip II, you're bringing back all the old memories and political layers, the Macedonia that they were originally a part of. Whoever said they wanted to take over Persia, make it to India, Egypt, all these things? Cleitus shouts, "It was the hand that saved you." Praising Philip II. It was the hand that saved you, as in like his hand, when it cut off that guy's arm, was really Philip's hand. It's kind of a low blow, and Alexander snaps. He grabs a spear from the guard, and he runs his friend through the chest. Cleitus falls dead on the floor. Alexander immediately collapses in remorse and regret, kind of tries to hurt himself with the same spear. His guards stop him. This was a band of brothers kind of a story. What is a band of brothers? It's a famous storyline, book, movie series about men who trained together and who stormed the beaches at Normandy, part of a more than a year-long process to end World War II. Americans. Band of brothers. But those Americans knew what they were fighting for, knew what they're fighting against. This band of brothers with Alexander is gone. The king has killed the man who actually saved him. The idea that Alexander is Achilles. Well, I mean, if the more you know about Achilles, the more you may see there is some tragedy going on here. So we need to lighten it up a little bit. It's getting a little sad and heavy. So at a place called Opus, the army completely mutinies, and Alexander tells his veterans that they can go home. But instead of cheering, they start shouting insults that just cut Alexander all the way to the bone. Go campaign with your father Ammon, Zeus Ammon. Go with Zeus. Now mocking, fake divinity, telling him he's an orphan of his own making. Ow, oh, there we go. He was involved in the plot against his father. But the ultimate crash happened in India in 326 BC when his men just refused to continue any further to the east, any further in India. That was the end of the growth of the map. And this god king, Alexander, has to listen to now his next most loyal general. Cleitus said, "A noble thing, O king, is to know when to stop." A noble thing, O king. And Aristotle taught him nobility. Nevertheless, Alexander is furious and was sulking in his tent. He's waiting for the army to beg forgiveness, but instead they did turn back. And you knew that from our previous lesson, number 40. But it's time for monuments. We got to lighten this thing up a little bit because many good things are being built up, not just monument to his ego. But let's move on to the monuments of Hellenism in a better society that he's building with his status and with his money. Alexander didn't just bring spears to India. He brought his mobile university. You know, he was a student of Aristotle. Aristotle was a student of Plato. Plato had the first university. But Aristotle was different with empiricism. He taught Alexander empirical observations and measurements. And Alexander brought his team of bematists. They were human odometers, and their only job is to count their steps and measure the size of the earth. And because of them, the map of the known world changed forever. Alexander wasn't just measuring the world and keeping it there in the university. He mailed it home. Do you know that the last time we mailed something home to Athens, it was a bunch of Persian armor from the earliest battle and victory, and he wanted that armor to be on display in Athens, on the Acropolis, for everyone to see the treasure. Remember when the Persians had once burned Athens, burned the Acropolis. So that was sent home by Alexander. This is a little different. Now, this is the brain power. What his education with Aristotle meant is evident when he's sending home as many scientific samples. In fact, he sends them a ton of money. 800 talents to fund biological research. So that's hundreds of millions of dollars of today's money, for science grants to study more. He ordered thousands of men, actually the hunters and the gameskeepers, the fishermen, to report what they find, different species, and report that to Aristotle. Send it home, send it back to Athens. While the army was marching, they were packing crates with creatures the Greeks had never seen before. They're sending back to Athens some tigers, leopards, 11 elephants. They're going to Aristotle's Lyceum. I visited the Lyceum. It's not that far from Plato's Academy. Real gathering place. How exciting it would have been for Aristotle and his students now to see all of this. Because Alexander is finding things and making empirical observations that must have been like magic, like a fantasy, going all the way to the Indus Valley. He discovered wool that grows on wild trees. What do you call that? Wool that grows on wild trees? Cotton. They discover cotton. They found reeds that produce honey without the help of bees. What do you call it? Sugar cane. And even finding a breed of ox in India that was so strong, he sent the best specimens back to Macedonia to improve local farm stock. While the army is off fighting, Alexander was literally trying to cross-pollinate the continents. This exploration is like launching the Apollo 11 moon mission into the ancient world. He ordered his admiral Nearchus to sail the mysterious ocean from the Indus River back to the Persian Gulf, and Nearchus faced whales that the Greeks thought were sea monsters. He navigated tides that were bigger than anything in the Mediterranean. He was in the ocean, and he proved that these waterways connected. Alexander might have failed to conquer the world politically. I mean, he conquered a lot. The map is really big, but scientifically, he successfully connected East and West. And for the first time, Europe and India are not just rumors to each other, they were neighbors on the same map. The inspiration, Aristotle. The money, the Lyceum, the future legacy. This is what Alexander should have been focused on instead of the metamorphosis that might have messed with his head a little bit and brought him down. Because on his retreat, away from the Indus River, going back to Babylon, his troops are not happy with him. It's just been going on too far away from home. Too distant. Alexander is even trying to punish his troops marching through the desert. In 323 BC, getting to Babylon, he was master of the world. He had God status. He had done so many things to help the world, connecting East and West. And the amount of wealth is unimaginable. Trillionaire status. Is he the first, second, third richest guy in the world? But we know from the records that he captured 180,000 talents of silver, which is enough money to buy every kingdom in Greece 10 times over. The money cannot fix the glitch in his soul. At this time also, at Ecbatana, the city, his best friend, his companion since childhood, at the school that Aristotle taught, Hephaestion died. Hephaestion caused tremendous grief for Alexander. He didn't cause it. His death caused it. Alexander's grief turns into form of madness. Even like he executes his doctor when he fails to save Hephaestion. He spends 12,000 talents on the funeral and the pyre for Hephaestion. It's actually like a wooden ziggurat, 60 meters tall, just to burn Hephaestion's body. But on June 10th, 323 BC, in Babylon, the screen goes black on Alexander. The fever takes him. Was it a bug bite? Malaria? Typhoid? Was he poisoned? He's 33 years old. High and lifted up, a glorified King of Kings, Lord of Lords. His generals gather around his deathbed and they ask him the most important question in history. And I'm asking you, what do you think that is? A 33-year-old with this huge kingdom. What do you say? Who gets the kingdom when you die? To whom do you leave the kingdom? You know, his wife, Roxana, was pregnant. Alexander had a half-brother. Alexander does not name either one of those. Alexander whispers, to kratisto, to the strongest. His final act, his command on his deathbed. I mean, he knows that without him, this entire thing is not going to stay together. That this hardware system of the military, it's going to crash. His generals, some of whom he grew up with in Aristotle's school, are going to spend the next 40 years kind of tearing the world apart. Perdiccas, Ptolemy, Seleucus are some names that we'll cover in the next lesson, and they will greatly influence the map for centuries. No one's going to outdo Alexander. Definitely none of his successors, because none of them will be the cosmocrator, the cosmos leader. Alexander has died. But the software that he installed, the Hellenism that has been spread, the influence, the impact, that survives. And that's going to continue in many, many future lessons and will help us understand why the Romans do what they do, but I'm getting way ahead of ourselves. You know that he has already marked out the great city of Alexandria using flour and saying that this Alexandria will be a focus in the world, feeding the world, and that will be an important Roman city, a place that we will go to many times in future lessons. So I digress. What did you just watch? We watched the man try to wrestle God for God status and cosmos control, the Pothos that his mom said. He had the right ambition that Aristotle helped him try to balance. Alexander has died, but he conquered the map. He could not conquer death. And it is the profound tension in our classical journey for truth. Can't conquer death. We want to know everything. We want to see everything and do everything and conquer everything, but we are human. It's the timeless human truth, and we have to understand our destiny. The life of Alexander, I hope that you have enjoyed. You've put yourself in some of these places and situations with Alexander because you have ambition. Do you want the fire like Alexander? Or do you want the warmth of some of the results that Alexander gave us? Because maybe a wise lesson is that you can't have both. Thank you for taking the time to learn something that matters in all of history, and that includes your history, some classical truth for your journey. Because kingdoms rise and fall, power fades, but virtue endures.